We are back here at the Cyber Executive Podcast, where we talk to industry experts about risk, technology, and leadership. I am your host, Marc Ashworth, and today I have a pleasure of having renowned cryptologist Dr. Peter Gutmann with the University of Auckland in New Zealand here with me today. Thank you, Peter, for being a guest here on the Cyber Executive Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Just a quick reminder for everyone to be sure to like or follow us on your favorite podcasting app, and be sure to share the Executive Podcast with all your friends. So back in March of this year, you released the best title ever for a paper. I'm sorry, this is just such a great name. The replication of quantum factorization records with an 8-bit home computer, an abacus, and a dog. I mean, that's just awesome of a title. And I first heard about this on my second favorite podcast, the Security Now podcast with Steve Gibson, as he talked about it. And I was like, I need to see if he can join me on here on the Cyber Executive. And what a great, topic in general. And I've been wanting to get someone to talk about quantum. And so just thank you very much for being here. And how did you come up with that name and do that correlation between quantum, a dog, and an abacus, and a Commodore VIC-20? I mean, that's just awesome.
Well, so the background to this was, I'd done a talk earlier on the background behind all the quantum hype. And then in that talk, I mentioned the fact that most of the quantum factorization records can be matched with a dog trained to bark 3 times. And then, so another researcher in Switzerland said, well, why not do a paper about it? So, we came up with a paper and took the most ridiculously underpowered devices, or things that aren't even computers, and said these have the same performance as the world's most powerful quantum computer.
And the amazing part, it didn't cost $100 million for those pieces of technology now, did it? So
No, it was basically the abacus was secondhand. The dog is a friend of mine's dog that I borrowed, who came from a shelter. And the VIC-20 was done on an emulator, so it cost almost nothing.
Yeah, that's great. So, in your paper, you evaluate the very successful quantum computing factorizations that have been published. These research papers, and that they're saying that they factorized this or these numbers and 48 bits or whatever it might be. But then you did an amazing job of just breaking down their process from the mathematics standpoint. And this isn't a technical thing, so let's not get into the mathematics of that. Someone can go read your paper off of that. But can you kind of explain at a higher level, what they did and how all of this thing about RSA is going to be worthless with crypto, and we're really not close to that. So can you kind of start talking a little bit about that for me?
Sure. So the thing with quantum computers is that I refer to them in both the paper and the earlier talk I did as physics experiments, because that's really what they are. If you look at, let's say, in the 1940s, you had the computers back then, which were really just very sophisticated adding machines, but they were referred to as electronic brains, even though they weren't, and that they still aren't today, really. And with quantum computers, they're kind of physics experiments rather than computers, and that's what you need to think of them as. So if you look at the actual dictionary definition, if you look at what a computer does, a computer, you feed in data, like you've got a spreadsheet, you feed in a bunch of financial results, and then you say, can you predict the earnings for the next 5 years, something like that. A so-called quantum computer can't actually do that. If you look at the definition of the term experiment, this is a scientific procedure undertaken to make a discovery or to demonstrate a known fact. And that's what quantum computers do. They take a known fact, or at least the experimenters take a known fact, like the 2 factors of a number, and then they design an experiment, a quantum computer, to verify that fact. So they already know the answer in advance, and the only thing the quantum computer is doing is saying this is confirming that the answer you've already known and got in advance is actually the answer you want.
Yeah, and to take that information and then to kind of say, okay, here's this 2048-bit RSA thing, number, and where there's not the known factorization, that's a long ways away to get from point A to point B off of there.
It's not even a known factorization. Like, for example, the 2 numbers they take, and this is something we used to our advantage in the paper. the two numbers they take differ by only 1 or 2 bits around the square root of the value. So you multiply the two almost identical values together, and you get this 2048-bit number. So in order to, in inverted commas, factor that number, you take the square root and take one that's 1 bit higher, one that's 1 bit lower, and that's the product. So no RSA key would ever be created like that because they're utterly insecure. However, because they've been artificially constructed to make them very easy to factor, okay, you can easily factor them all on a quote quantum computer or physics experiment, but you can also easily factor them on an abacus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and taking these two known smaller numbers, for example, and having that factorization is really not scalable to be able to do that. Wouldn't you agree?
And even then, with the factorizations of 15 and 21, they used something called the compiled version of Shor's algorithm. So the factorization algorithm is something called Shor's algorithm, and that runs on a quantum computer / physics experiment. And the idea is, for people not familiar how you do this, RSA is the product of two very large primes. And so the public key is the product of those two very large primes. The private key is the two very large primes multiplied together. And mathematically, it is very, very difficult to go from the public key back to the private key. And so what Shor's algorithm does, or is supposed to do, in theory, on a theoretical quantum computer, is to go from the public key back to those two very large primes. And what the compiled version of Shor's algorithm does is you know in advance what the private key already is. So you already know the answer in advance before you even begin. And then your physics experiment says, yes, we confirm that the answer you already know is actually the correct answer.
Yeah, and with that, the two large numbers, the two big large primes that they had in their studies, or in a couple of the studies, they seem to be very impressive. I mean, these were, big numbers. But when you convert those to binary in general, it was pretty much like one and lots of zeros and a one. And, so the overall computation effort off of that would be a lot simpler.
Because the synthetic values that have been constructed to make them very easy to factor on a quantum computer / physics experiment. Actually, I'm going to call it a physics experiment from now on because that's really what
that's
it is.
Fine. I love that. It's so and when you look back at it, and if you step back and look at everything that's being done with it, I mean, really, that truly is what it is, because it's can't do anything else really at this point. So it makes a lot of sense.
You can basically add as many digits or binary bits as you want. There was a great paper published by some IBM researchers about 10 years ago called Pretending to Factor Large Numbers on a Quantum Computer. And they documented a mechanism for creating arbitrary length numbers that, if you want to claim 10,000 bits, you've got 10,000 bits. If you want to claim 20,000 bits, you've got 20,000 bits. And they did manufacture a 20,000 bit number that you could factor using a physics experiment, because it reduced down to a much, much simpler problem that you could then easily factor on even the a very tiny toy physics experiment. And the thing with cryptography is that these numbers, you're not dealing with numbers that have been artificially constructed to make them easy to factor. You're dealing with actual hard numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A moment ago, you mentioned Shor's algorithm, which was created by Peter Shor. Excuse me. And, it's kind of, it's definitely the name, where Shor's algorithm is what, I hear a lot off there. So it seems to kind of be like the standard that's used for this. And in some other papers, they were talking about more of a lattice approach that was done by a Schnorr's algorithm from Klaus Schnorr. Is that a better approach? Is it just, is it because it's more likely to be able to be done in a quantum or in a physics experiment,
Not
or
really.
is it just a different approach?
Schnorr's algorithm is an interesting mathematical trick, and it works for very small numbers, and it doesn't scale at all. So taking a problem that doesn't scale with classical computers and moving it across to adding quantum magic. There was a good online write-up that someone did about it, where he sort of described it as, you add quantum and you hope the quantum rubs off on the algorithm that isn't very good and makes it a lot better. But it doesn't work like that. There's another algorithm called Grover's algorithm, which is effectively a search algorithm, and there have been attempts to again convert cryptanalysis programs into Grover's algorithms, and then you can simplify it by doing a search using Grover's algorithm. And it's the same thing. You need to create an artificially constructed number that you could then move across to use Grover's algorithm and then solve it. But that's, cryptanalysis or cryptography doesn't work like that. The guy that you're attacking is not going to use an artificially constructed number that makes it very easy for you to attack them.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So one thing that I noticed in some of the writings when I went back and kind of looked at some of the articles that you were referencing and some of the other ones that they talk about the hybrid approach to that. And when I finally kind of saw it, and then also then in your paper you explain what that is around. It's not that quantum's doing this; they're running as much as they can on a standard computer, and then taking the last step basically to the physics experiment, and saying, "Oh, look what it did." So, I mean, what's the point of that? I mean, I get what the point of it is, but from your take off of there, is this just due to pressure trying to produce progress and make it sound like it's doing more? Or what do you think?
You have to announce that you've done something better than everyone else, and you've got bigger numbers than everyone else. It's the same thing with the announcement of quantum supremacy. I mean, we've had, I don't know how many announcements of quantum supremacy over the years, and you've either got it or you don't have it. So why have we had 20 announcements, all from different groups, all saying they've achieved it? And that's the case here. There is enormous pressure to produce some sort of result. And so that's, and again, I think it was the Pretending to Factor Large Numbers paper, said that the breakthroughs aren't necessarily in quantum computing. It's in coming up with new ways to manufacture more impressive looking numbers that you can then put in results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that, because as one of the ways that I see that this supremacy is happening is around how many qubits they're able to produce. But then it seems to be that the fault rate of those qubits is so high that for error correction, they might be a 1225, but they're really getting 2 valid qubits out of the thing. I don't know if the ratio is that much, but it sure seems like that ratio, that because they're talking that it may take tens of millions of qubits to do something like this, but the quality of qubits that would be there because of error correction could be just in the hundreds of thousands or something like that. So it sounds like there's really a long way before they're getting close to that.
Yeah, and that's what. So in the paper we use the term sleight of hand factorization. So what you're doing is not actually taking a 2000-bit number and factorizing it. You're using a sleight of hand trick to make it look like you're doing that. And so there is a lot of that in this field. And the same thing with quantum computers. Every time you see an announcement of some new record, you've got to wait a couple of months for other researchers to come in and look at it and say, oh yeah, actually the trick is right over here where they've pulled a fast one on you. And a lot of the factorizations that we reference in the paper were done with 2 or 3 qubit quantum computers. So, and that's the advance that's been made. Like you can first of all, you could manufacture, let's say, a 2-digit number and factor it with a 2 qubit quantum computer, which a 2 qubit computer is basically useless in practice. And then, okay, we've managed to manufacture a 5-digit number, and now we've got a 10-digit number, now we've got a 20-digit number, and you've still got the same 2 qubit computer that quote factors it. But all you've done is become increasingly more sophisticated in manufacturing these artificial numbers that look impressive that you can then use with your 2 qubit quantum computer.
Yeah, so basically, like David Copperfield would be very impressed with the amount of sleight of hand that's being happening in these magic tricks that's being presented to everyone of it, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we went into in the earlier talk is so magicians use something called a force deck, which is a deck of cards that essentially has all the same values, so they can force you to pick particular cards. So if you were doing quantum factorization with a magician with a deck of cards, you would give them, for example, to factorize the number 15, you'd give them a deck of cards which had all 5s and all 3s in it. And that's what a lot of this quantum factorization is. The compiled version of Shor's algorithm is the equivalent of a magician's force deck, because you know in advance what the 2 values are. and all the quantum computer has to do is to pick those two known values that you've already selected.
Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of my peers out there and everyone in cyber is worried about, asymmetrical encryption. We talked a little bit about that earlier in RSA and how long before, our encryption is going to be able to be decrypted. So everyone's saving everything to be able to use quantum to go back and decrypt it and get intelligence information or whatever it might be. Being that, the largest number is, maybe truly been factorized as 21. Is this a concern that we have in the near future? Or are we talking, because this has been going on for 25 years now almost, right?
Yep.
And 21 is the largest number that we could do without that sleight of hand tricking or that hybrid side of things. So is this something we need to worry about in the near future, do you think?
Well, and again, sorry, I keep referring to the earlier talk because I put a lot of that stuff in there. So
Yeah.
what I did was to basically just draw a graph, one for RSA factorization. So we've been doing this since basically the 1970s, and you can just plot data points on the graph, and it gives you a pretty straight line for the last 30, 40 years. So you can say starting in the mid-70s and going up to 2023, I think was the last published one. You graph it, you draw a straight line through it, and you can say based on this constant, steady rate of progress, we know that by this year, you need a key of this size. And I did the same thing with the quantum factorization records, where we've only really got 2 data points, and draw a graph on that. And on that graph, by the time we can factorize a 1024-bit key, which we can do right now with current computers, by the time we can factorize a key using a quantum computer, that's in 2000. It's going to take 2,000 years before we get to that point. However, and this is the problem we ran into with the paper, the 2 factorizations of 15 and 21 used a compiled form of Shor's algorithm, so they knew the answer in advance. So they didn't actually apply Shor's algorithm to factorize anything. They just used it to confirm the answer they already knew. So in practice, and this made the paper a bit difficult to write, we actually have 0 data points. We were not able to find any case anywhere of someone actually applying Shor's algorithm to recover the factors of a number where they didn't know the answer in advance.
Yeah, that's a good point that, they knew the answer even to those numbers before versus it calculating it and stuff ahead of time. So
And then you're back to the experiment thing. You're not actually doing the factorization. You're constructing an experiment to confirm the answer that you already know.
yeah. So with if we look at, we kind of talked a moment ago about the 1225 qubits that is out there from what do we want to call it, the dominance of quantum. And I think IBM has that record now. It keeps going back and forth between them and another company, it seems like. Where do you think, if they're really still doing just some of the basic stuff through 2 qubits, do you think that there's a certain threshold or a certain number or that they really need to get to, or are we looking really further down the road with this? And I know you mentioned, mathematically from your graph off of there that, a long period of time, but do you think that there's a certain number that they need to hit where they might get something to larger numbers and actually might be able to do something with Shor's?
It's very hard to tell because the use of sleight of hand is so prevalent out there that every time you get a new result announced, you have to analyze it or wait for someone else who knows much more than you about it to analyze it, just to see what it is they've really done. So it's almost impossible to tell, if a new result gets announced, is this legitimate or is it just more sleight of hand? So unfortunately, I can't really make any prediction about that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And that stuff does change kind of frequently. Some progress is happening a little bit more maybe, but to at least grow that base. But, I guess we still have to, there's probably more of it we don't understand than what we truly understand when it comes to it in the first place to take full advantage of it.
Okay.
One thing as we were talking about earlier, around your paper and everything, There was also a recent article from Bruce Schneier that was just released that basically, as a peer, reviewed your paper too and said, yeah, this is right. So, I mean, have you heard any other feedback or anything from other cryptologists or any others off of it, or any pushback from the industry because of what you called
No
out?
pushback, and that's I was hoping that somebody would come in and say, well, actually, you've got this wrong, and here's something where they have done it.
Mm-hmm.
We've had nobody's come in and said you've got this wrong. And one thing that's been it was a pleasant surprise is that a number of well-known names in cryptography have contacted us privately and said, really love the paper. Yep, and I agree with it. But
Yeah,
I guess it's difficult. They're not going to say in public
sure.
that they agree with it.
Sure. So one thing, just kind of a little off topic here and stuff that I was kind of curious about. There's, as a cryptologist, you hear, a lot of countries in the U.S. and Australia is just as much, doing this around wanting backdoors to cryptology. They want to be able to, eat their cake and everything and so, but they have various, you know they're wanting to break the laws of mathematics off of there to allow for backdoor monitoring to take place, for the ability to get to encrypted information. What's your take off of that? Because I know from, I think many in the industry, from the security industry, is like, look, you can't do this. So, what's your thought as, someone that lives the mathematics of this all the time, and is there some weird formula that we don't know about that could do this, or is it, what all of us non-mathematical people that's in cyber that says, no, this is crazy, quit asking for this, we can't do that?
It's not really possible. I mean, there was something in the 1990s called the crypto wars, where governments had tried exactly the same thing. And there was maybe people spent 10 years, some very smart people spent about 10 years trying to do something like this. And back then it was called key escrow. So you have one key that's shared with the person you're talking to, and one key that's handed over to the government. The problem with this is that cryptography really isn't designed to work that way. So you ended up with these incredibly complicated, and because of the complexity, incredibly fragile, and therefore possibly open to attack systems that just didn't work that way. And a second problem with handing keys over to the government is that there have been a huge number of data breaches of US government agencies, and quite possibly Australia and the UK as well. We just don't hear about them there, where foreign countries have just gone all through their systems and seized huge amounts of sensitive data. So if you were to give, say, the US government backdoor access to everyone's communications, you would, by extension, probably be giving the same access to hostile foreign countries.
Right.
Because a
Yeah.
backdoor doesn't recognize, it doesn't say US only. It's
Right.
just a backdoor for anyone.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They're wanting it for law enforcement purposes, but when it comes down to it, no country has been able to keep their data secure. Even, whether it's the most powerful businesses or the most powerful country governments, everyone's still getting breached. And so how can you protect something as critical as that key that's the back door if we can't even protect anything else off of there? So it's that part in itself doesn't make sense, that they're trying to pass legislation all around the world to allow that to happen. So I just, that popped in my head, and I just wanted to get your take off of that, so I appreciate that. So
Yes, I'm basically old enough to have been involved in the first round of these crypto wars 20, 30 years ago. And it didn't work then, and it's not going to work now.
yeah, yeah. So just kind of some general questions that I ask everybody. Let's see. So just some general questions that I ask everybody is, what is something that you're tired of hearing about?
Quantum cryptanalysis. Well, so a problem with this is, we've currently got a multi-billion-dollar global cybercrime industry, That's been and it's it's a booming industry that's built on the failure of cryptography to do what it's supposed to be doing. And if you look at there's an organization called OWASP, which it stands for Open Web Application Security, but they do just general security for everything, and they've got a top 10 list of top 10 vulnerabilities, buffer overflows, SQL injection, that sort of stuff. And they've been going for about 20 odd years. And if you look at the top 10 list from 20 years ago, it's pretty much identical to the top 10 list today. So a couple of names have changed and they've shuffled a few things around, but essentially the same things that were a problem 20 years ago are still a problem right now. And that's what we need to be addressing. That's what attackers are exploiting. But instead of saying, we need to fix these problems that are the cause of a booming global cybercrime industry, we're playing around with these quantum physics experiments, which no attacker is using because they're not good for anything.
Yeah, the fact that cyber, between the criminal aspect of it and the overall industry of it, is if you look at the GDP of countries, it is the third largest GDP in the world.
Wow.
I mean, it is just amazing. It passed this past year, was it Germany? I think they were number 3 before, and or Japan, one or the other, and flipped past them. So, so just the fact that it is that prolific and continues to grow is just terrible. That companies don't take security seriously in a lot of cases, and definitely on the development side. I mean, look at how often we have to update stuff and they keep fixing or not even fixing the root cause. They're just putting patches out there and just, so it's a mess, and hopefully someday it'll get better. So.
Well, that's the thing. I'm on mailing lists for a bunch of standards bodies, and if you look at what's being discussed on there, it's just quantum. What about fixing some of the actual problems we're facing rather than distracting yourself with these things that no one cares about?
Right.
Except for obviously the people on the standards bodies, because it's great. They get to produce lots and lots of new standards.
Yeah. And I'm assuming, but I'll throw this question back out here because you just kind of hit on a lot of this. What is something in the industry that we should do more of? And maybe it is take more seriously the security side. But any additional thoughts on that?
I think lots of people have been saying this pretty much forever. Until we've addressed the top 10, there's no point in dealing with item number 27,000 on the list, because no one ever uses those attacks. It's the top 10 that we need to focus on, not distractions from actually addressing the top 10 or the top 20 or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then finally, what's next for Peter? Are we going to get another great article anytime soon, or anything along that line? What's next for you?
Usually I if something annoys me enough, then I'll speak out about it. And at the moment, it's just the quantum stuff because it's really annoying. But yeah, I have no idea. Whatever annoys me next, I'll have a go at that.
Okay, great. Well, Peter, thank you very much for being a guest on the podcast, and I look forward to the next thing, and hope to have you on there. Or if we get some more juicy details on quantum, that I'll throw it your way and get your take off of it. So, thank you very much for being a guest today.
Okay, well, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, and for everyone else, again, just a reminder to click like or follow, depending on what's your favorite podcast app, and be sure to share the Cyber Executive podcast. So tell your friends, and until next time, thank you very much for watching.